Hey everybody, this is Pastor Doug. If I could just add to this past week's message from First Chronicles, I guess, also Psalm 106, 107, 118, 136, Psalm 100, which I did not know about until I woke up that Sunday morning. If I could just add, well, I'm reluctant to add because it went longer than it should have. I was asked to keep it short and I tried. I thought I did and I discovered that I didn't. When it was too late. But there were still things that I cut out, still things I'd like to add. And if I did, this is what it would be. It would be a little bit more about the book of Chronicles. Here's what you got to understand. God has not spoken to us in verses. He has not spoken to us in chapters. Now, we have chapters, we have verses. They were added later to help us to find things that we need to find and memorize and learn a little better, study, all that. So they're helpful. But he didn't speak to us in just random one verse and then another and then another. He spoke to us in books. Books were the complete unit of thought that God used when he communicated to us. So you have to really look at the entire book because the entire book contributes to the chapter, contributes to the verse, contributes to the passage. There is a big picture, and while you can look at just a verse and get a truth, you're going to get a whole lot more if you look at the big picture. This is especially true when it comes to Chronicles. Right away, you see a problem because I call it Chronicles, and you might call it First and Second Chronicles. It was split in half when vowels were added to the original Hebrew text. Original Hebrew did not have vowels. People just understood how vowels worked and were able to insert them mentally on their own. When vowels were added, it doubled the size of the text. So same with Kings, same with Samuel. They had to chop it in half. That chop is arbitrary. That's just for our benefit. That's not how it originally was. So it was originally one book, Chronicles. It was also originally a writing and not a book of history. Now, we have our English Old Testaments, and they are arranged with history. Sometimes they say law, the first 5 books, and then history, and then poetry, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, those 5 in the middle, and then prophets, and they may say minor prophets, major prophets and minor prophets. So sometimes we say 3 sections, sometimes say 5. Jesus, the Jewish arrangement that Jesus would have followed, they had 3 sections as well, but they were different. It was law, prophets, and writing. So law was first 5 books, same as for us. The prophets were Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, not Daniel, not Lamentations, and then the 12. But it was also Judges, Joshua, and Kings, what we would consider books of history. They say God spoke through history, so those are also prophets. Chronicles, which is right after Kings in our English Bible, we just think it's another book of history. It was in a completely different section. It was in the writings. I can't tell you what the difference is between the writings and history. I asked ChatGPT and it said the writings are anything that doesn't go in the law of the prophets. Not very helpful, but that's the answer that I got. It does seem to me that writings are a little bit more devotional. Like if you were to compare Kings to Chronicles, Kings is saying this is what happened. Maybe even this is why it happened. Chronicles is more saying this is what it means. So we do have, and I did say this in the message, that these were people who came back from the exile. Kings was written by somebody who lived up to the exile. Chronicles was written probably a couple decades after the exile. They're trying to figure out where they fit in God's story. That's what leads them to that key phrase, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. That's how you have to understand that phrase. It's not just that they happen to record it there, but that these post-exilic people who had experienced this terrible thing and then had this wonderful rebuild and their lives were restored, they had come to understand that firsthand. There's some other things that you see, though, if you look at the larger book. One interesting thing is that the book starts with a 9-chapter genealogy. Genealogies aren't my favorite. One day I picked it up. I was beginning to read Chronicles. That was the assigned text today. And I said, Lord, I'm not up for the genealogies. Can you show me something here? Well, I started 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 1. It says Adam. That's the first word. And the Lord spoke to me through that. See, they were still part of the story. That's what that says. They were figuring that they had been cut out of the story because of their transgression, because of their fall. We're not part of the story anymore. They've now, a couple of decades after the rebuild, they said, no, that must not be true. They go to tell the story again, which Kings does not do. Kings doesn't go all the way back to Adam, but they go all the way back to Adam. And they say, see, we're still part of the story. And the reason that we're still part of the story, we're still connected to Adam, where the story began, is because the Lord is good, his love endures forever, and we ought to give thanks to him. One last thing, again, going back to the Hebrew arrangement of the Bible, which Jesus would have known, Chronicles not only is not among the books of history, it's among that books of writings, the last section, it's also the last book in that section. So it's the last book of the Jewish arrangement, the last book of the Old Testament as Jesus would have known it. I don't think that's coincidental. I think that's intentional because it's not chronological. Ezra and Esther and Nehemiah are also in there, and they come later chronologically. Somebody put this book last, I believe, to give the final word. This is the final word of the Old Testament if we look at the Jewish arrangement. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. You may have stumbled, you may have sinned, you may have paid a penalty, but you're still part of the story. That's what I would have added if I had a couple more minutes. Thanks for being with me here today. Hope it was a blessing to you.